I don't know if I'll ever get this right because I'm old, so maybe that's what's going on. I guess the only people who can hear me now are the Twitch people. Why isn't this fucking bruh? What the fuck is going on here? What the fuck? Why can't I see my fucking thing? Alright, something's going on here. Why is my live? Oh. No, I want this to be public. What? Oh, God. Alright, something got fucked up. I think it's working now. I gotta just delete that. Everything's just fucking out of sync right now, so sorry about that. I am fixing shit. More actions, delete forever. Understand. Delete that one too. Alright. Alrighty. I think I am... Let's see. Okay, one person. Alright. Let me just pop this out. And then I can get the chat box going. The box of chat. There we go. There we are. There we are. Just a little chat box here. And there we are. There we are. Just a little chat box here. And there we are. There we are. Just a little chat box here. Let me mute myself so I don't hear myself 100 times. Let's see. Oh, that's not the one I want to know. There we go. Blending mode, lighten. What the fuck? Blending method. Lighten. There we go. There we go. I'm sure nobody's here anyway. Because, yeah. A lot of snafu today. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. Some of you might not know. But anyway, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about any of that, you know. I've been given orders to not talk about things. I feel like Malcolm X, you know, in the Nation of Islam, you know. Sup, Steve? How's it going? Check in, Sar. Sorry, I'm late again. Thought I was gonna start at 6, but I thought I had a meeting. Ended up that there was no meeting, but then I didn't eat food, so I had to order food, I guess. I hadn't eaten all day, so I just did that. And then I kind of started at the regular time. Maybe that's why, because I kept telling people 6 o'clock, and then I was like, maybe not, maybe more like 7. And then I was like, you know what, probably 8, so... I'm guessing people just take their time to get in. Let me just notify my Discord. Look at me being a streamer. I feel like I might need to like figure more of this streaming stuff out. You know, I know this is a very low effort stream, but let me just wait till some more people get in here. I gotta turn on my AC. How's it going, Steve? By the way, since you get some one-on-one time here, you get you get to ask me, yo, what's up, Showgunner? What up? How's it going? Since you guys are the first ones here, you guys get some private time. You can ask me anything you want, as long as it doesn't involve a certain person that I'm not allowed to talk about anymore. Dinner was fine. I had chicken parmesan. There's a place that is relatively close to me that does it pretty well. So I just get that every now and then. Chicken parm, yeah, exactly. Yep. China, North Korea, Vietnam. The real places where they have actual socialism and they know what they're fucking talking about and they're not fucking LARPing all the time, you know? You know, people I read and study, you know, Ho Chi Minh, Kim Il Sung, Mao Zedong. You know, some people might like to study, some people might like to study Western intellectuals that actually led to some other political movement. But I like to stick with the basics. I like to stick it with the people who know what they're talking about because they actually went out and did it, right? Mao Zedong, right? What did he do? Well, first he did try to work with the KMT. He did try to work with Chiang Kai-shek and you know, Sun Yat-sen, obviously. And yeah, that didn't work out either. And Kim Il-sung, well, you know, and then he had to run away, long march, defended against the, you know, crush the Japs with guerrilla, and then like fighting, and then basically showed that the KMT were just fucking scum, waiting around till the Americans cleaned up the fucking rest. Yeah, exactly, Andrew. You chicken parm sar. Let me just put in my NGL link. If you guys want to ask questions that I'll answer at the end. I should probably have some sort of, I feel like professional streamer. Oh, fuck. What the fuck? I feel like professional streamers have like automated processes, but I'm so fucking boomer or lazy that I don't really know how to do that shit. But yeah, no. But yeah, you know, Mao Zedong actually did it, actually walked it, actually started from nothing, started from the bottom, now IYKYK type shit, you know. You know, Kim Il Sung, right? Where did he start? He started in the mountains in Manchuria, fighting the fucking Japs at 19 years old. In 1931, I believe, he started his resistance. You know, there were other, obviously, the Righteous Army in Korea was already formed in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. So there was already guerrilla fighting against the Japs that was kind of, or a resistance movement against the Japs going on even before the annexation period. And so they were mostly in that region, the North Korea / Manchuria region. And so when Kim Il-sung's family moved from Pyongyang to Manchuria, and when he turned 19, he was born, I think, 1912, Kim Il-sung, and then in 1931, at the age of 19, he started fighting some Japs, you know. And so, yeah, he kind of understands what it is to fucking be a fighter for justice, you know, what it is to really have that revolutionary insight, you know. You're not going to get from books, right? You're not going to get from books. I mean, I love books myself, don't get me wrong. When push comes to shove, you know, when the chips are fucking down, you know, like, people don't listen to fucking books. They listen to power. They listen to, you know, fucking, like, what is actually moving the needle, you know? And then you have Ho Chi Minh, right? Born in 1890, he was the oldest out of the three. I think Mao Zedong was born 1893, so slightly older than Mao. But by the age of, what, 27, 28, 29, when the Versailles Treaty is signed in 1919, that means 29, I think. He goes to France. He petitions for Vietnamese independence when Woodrow Wilson is giving his, fucking whatever points for League of Nations bullshit. Yeah, well, wait a second. Why is the chat not being updated? Oh. Wait, that was weird. That was weird. So the video's title is Taqiyya. Hide your strength, bide your time. So this was a concept I was introduced to, actually, fairly recently. Taqiyya, apparently it's kind of like a Muslim term for don't show all the cards you got. You got to wait for the right moment. That's a hide your strength, bide your time. That was kind of like it might have been Sun Tzu who also said something like that. And, it's kind of like a thing that Lenin also abided by as well. He never wanted to get into a conflict where he was not sure of victory, or it wasn't like an existential conflict that they had to fight, right? Like obviously when they're fighting against fucking the Civil War in Russia, there was no choice but to fight, right? So you can't like not fight there. But he's talking about like battles that can't be won, and knowing when to pull back when you can't win those battles. Brest-Litovsk was kind of that, right? Had to pull back. The Germans were on their way, and they would never be able to defend themselves from Germany if they didn't make that deal. So it was just kind of like, look, let's give away this territory. Yeah, I know it sucks. It's terrible. There's a lot of shit we're giving up, but kind of have to do it, or we're gonna lose the entire fucking project, and we're just gonna all be taken over by Germany at that point. And so that was not a good outcome for them, obviously. So yeah, it's kind of like, and then even when they tried to continue after World War I ended, and they tried to now kind of like start a revolution in Poland, the Polish forces were too much for them to kind of, I guess, overtake. And, then Lenin realized, oh, you can't really force revolution onto people that don't necessarily want it or don't understand it, or, that because if the people rose up in Poland, then maybe it could have happened, right? Like they might have been converted to Soviet territory. But I think, Lenin was making the argument that like they just don't even know about Marxism there. The proletariat were not kind of like built up in a way so that they could, use their own class consciousness for revolution. And so, yeah. It's kind of like know when to pull back, right? Know when to retreat. Know when to because like, it's kind of like also in StarCraft, right? When you're playing some StarCraft and you see a death ball that's even bigger than yours, well, now you can't face it head on because you're just going to lose, because even in Wing Chun, like it's like hard against hard. You don't want to like fight someone straight up if they're stronger than you, because then they're just gonna like the harder hard wins. So, So it's just kind of like knowing when to pull back, regroup, and but I will say that sometimes, you can't always predict when you're going to win or lose a battle. So in those cases, sometimes you gotta experiment a little bit. Sometimes you gotta push some buttons, and see what door opens. And so, there is kind of like, even in that lost invasion to, or the war against Poland in I think it was like 1920 or something, when they had to pull back from Poland, the Soviets. Even that, they got information, right? They knew now not to make that mistake again. Trotsky, of course, didn't get that message because he's retarded. But that was the message. That was like the message of the Poland thing. Like, yep, permanent revolution, not a thing. Got to start with socialism in one country. That's basically what happened in 1920, in the early 1920s, where they were like, where even Lenin was like, yep, we couldn't do it, but he was kind of like the one that started the concept of socialism in one country, and that's what Stalin just ostensibly like extended. It was Trotsky who tried to make it seem like that was not the case, because Trotsky, yeah, I mean, Lenin was anti-Trotsky his entire life, right? Up until 1917, when Trotsky realizes the Bolsheviks are going to win, right? So Zinoviev and Lenin, they're both kind of like, oh shit, Lenin's looking like he's going to win. Like, I can see the people around here. They're all being like, yeah, Lenin knows what he's talking about because these Mensheviks and these SRs, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. So Trotsky was like, you know what? Let's let bygones be bygones, Lenin, my bro. You're my bro. I was always your bro, right? I'm your bro. I'm such a close bro to you that, like, I'm going to write this entire book about how you and I are basically the same. His autobiography, My Life in 1930, after he gets kicked out of the Soviet Union, is basically like, I was there. I was Lenin's bro, basically. It was me and Lenin. We were responsible for the entire revolution. It was just us two, basically. The Stalin guy, I don't know, but he's a little crazy. He's a little, he's a little rude. He's not the nicest guy. And so, maybe we should kick him out of the party and make me the next general secretary. What do you guys think about that? What do you guys think about that? What do you guys think about my time in Canada during World War II or World War I, where British authorities, MI6, let me into Russia? MI6, who had been monitoring this the entire time, have me in Canada and decide for some reason to let me go to Russia during the Russian Revolution. Isn't that interesting, right? Isn't that interesting, Mr. Trotsky? Right? And then so Trotsky gets into the Soviet Union, right? He gets into the Soviet Union. He pretends like he's like the head of the Red Army, like a LARP. But Stalin and other people are like, yeah, you weren't even part of the initial committee to start the revolution in October, so I don't know where this LARP thing is coming from. It seems like you're talking a lot about your importance, but when the facts are presented, it seems like you're doing a lot more bloviating. Comrade Trotsky might have nice and flowery words and $1,000 word salads, Anyway, If you couldn't tell, this I might be talking about something beneath what I'm talking about, because again, that's what this meta concept is all about, isn't it? Isn't it? And so, like, yeah, people can say all the right things, and people can know the right lines, and people can write the right lines, and people can say and do, but what are they actually doing? What are they actually doing for the cause? What have they actually sacrificed? What are the material things that they have done? Not just for, Marxism, but just in life. There's a lot of information about someone's life and their character. There's a lot of information about someone's character from just looking at their life history. And not just about what they talked about, but what they do and what they did. Okay, this guy is going to get removed. And put user. How do I fucking just report? Promotes terrorism. There you go. Hide user on my channel. There we go. You're dead. Get the fuck out. Winnie G. See, people are not even creative. Like, is that some fucking retard from Australia? Winnie G. Oh, look, Woo Mao. I'm like, fucking retard. Shut the fuck up. This isn't 2020, you dumb fucking boomer fucker. But yeah, exactly. Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you appear weak. Sup, holy cow. You are checking in, sorry. Everyone's just checking in. I think I said hi to everyone who checked in. Interested in learning more about the historical relationship between North Korea and China. Well, so it all started with the Korean War, obviously. 1950 to 1953. Basically, North Korea and South Korea formed right after 45, right? Military government was in South Korea, and North Korea was basically managed by Soviets that had formed in the north, because after the Japanese left, or after the Russians came and cleared everyone out, they were free to make their own kind of mini Soviets and mini collectives all around the country. And so after the war, the Soviets, Kim Il-sung was also part of the Red Army for the Soviets at that time. So then they kind of brought him and the rest of the kind of guerrillas that were fighting the Japanese, like the North Koreans that were actually doing the actual fighting instead of collaborating. They brought them to make up the elections and make up the government for North Korea. Right? And so basically in that period, the South was basically run by the military government, and they just used the secret Gestapo, Korean police that the Japs were fucking using to enforce their rule. All these fucking South Korean traitors were basically part of the fucking initial Korean Gestapo. They were literally fucking right-wing pieces of shit. Because when the Japs left, so keep in mind the timeline, right? August 15th is the official day when the Japs surrender, right? September 2nd is when American forces actually come to Korea. Because keep in mind, the Russian forces are already in North Korea because they stopped at the 38th because American forces told them to. But the American landing forces didn't come to South Korea until September 2nd. So during those 2 weeks, the fucking Japs there, what they did was they printed a whole bunch of fake fucking money because they knew that money was never going to fucking be worthless soon. So they printed all this fucking money, bought up all the fucking assets they could to that they could carry with them, and then bounced the fuck out of Korea. Then they told the fucking Americans, hey, here are the Koreans to use. We used them before, so you can use them too, basically. So the fucking Korean collaborators that the Japs had all fucking used became basically under the employment of the Americans into their military government soon after. And so because of that, they were still kind of like confused. The people in the South were still kind of like making Soviets, just like the North. It's just that once this military government was made, now they start fucking crushing these Soviets and basically enforcing like military government rule under pretty much MacArthur's command. Under this stuff, there's a lot of like shit that's going on. You know, people are discontent. They're like, wait, we just fucking fought a war against the Japs, or like we were just fucking colonized for them for 35 years. Now we're basically just being colonized by the fucking Americans. What the fuck is this bullshit? So there's a lot of resistance early on, right? Nobody really knows what communism or capitalism is at this point, because they just know fascism, right? They just know Jap fascism. So they don't even know like what the evils of communism, like whoever tells you that like it was because they were fleeing communism, like no, that was not the fucking case at all in Korea, because nobody knew what the fuck communism even was. Because during the Japanese occupation period, they explicitly banned any mention of communism, because guess who was doing the actual resisting against the Japs? It were the communists in Korea. Just like in France, just like in Vichy France, who were the fucking resistors there? It was the fucking actual communists in France. Who was the actual resistors in Korea? It was the actual fucking communists. So in Japan, they didn't want anyone knowing about communism, because then they were like, oh shit, they're going to wake up and try to resist us. So in South Korea, or in all of Korea pretty much, nobody really knew what the fuck Marxism was. Because it's been fucking 40 years of fighting. Nobody had time to like read books. They were all fucking like fighting for their lives. They were fighting for their like freedom, really. So there weren't any people reading lots of books, doing shit. It was just Kim Il-sung taking up his rifle and being like, these Japs have got to go. That's all he knew. That's all he knew in the beginning at 19. These Japs have got to go. And well, he was a legendary guerrilla fighter that the Japs tried to capture and attack. And basically the main reason why they had to expend so many resources in Manchuria to begin with. Something they were not happy about, but they eventually did, and had to basically like devote enough resources. So like Kim Il-sung had to retreat himself into Soviet territory. That was around 1941, I believe, when they're basically preparing for war against America, right? So they have to kind of like clear out their territory, make sure make sure Manchuria is all fine and safe. So they spent a lot of resources to get rid of him. And so in the South, there's all this fucking turmoil going on. There's all these fucking clown elections, all this political strife. And then finally, there's the Jeju Uprising in 1948, where... So Jeju Island is an island that is just south of Korea. It's like it's basically like a tourist tourist kind of like place now. But they had not gotten the memo that the rest of South Korea had gotten, and they kept their Soviet going. They kept their communal Soviet kind of going. And then when in 1948, when the American military wanted them to basically enforce their rule on Jeju Island as well, they gave them all these fucking weapons to basically coerce Jeju Island to be part of, South Korean stuff. And there was now what's known as Jeju Massacre, which I think was so fucking brutal that the people of Jeju, some of them actually fled to Japan. They fled to Japan, running away from American backed Korean fucking fuckface traitor scum. And even then, some of the RIK forces, they were like, what are we doing? Why are we? So they've defected over to the Jeju side because they're like, what the fuck are we doing? We're killing our own people. So, like on Jeju Island, they started, that's why the resistance was so strong, because even some of the soldiers were like, no, I'm not going to fucking do that. I'm going to fucking fight you guys, you fucking scum. So then a lot of that shit was happening. But a lot of people from Jeju Island were killed. I think it was like something like 10 to 20% of the island. I might be exaggerating. I don't fucking know. It was at least 10%, I think. What's up, Yoon? How's it going? Do I know you from somewhere? I think I've seen you on the stream before, but I'm not 100% sure. How do I know you, or how do you know me? Anyway. So there's all this shit going on with Jeju Island, but then there's also the fucking civil war between China and Taiwan, right? Or not Taiwan, KMT, because they hadn't fled to Taiwan yet. So the KMT and China are still embroiled in their own civil war from 1945 to 1949, right? And in 47, they're kind of on the ropes, actually. The CPC is somewhat on the ropes. And then Kim Il-sung's, I think Kim Il-sung either sent forces there, or there were already Korean Chinese forces that were aiding the CPC. And these were basically the elite fucking shock troops. Like, they had cut their teeth all over fucking Manchuria against the Japs for like 20, 30 years, right? So they were the fucking elite of the elite when it came to fighting the fucking KMT scum. Oh, I see you. Nice to see you here. So they were killing the KMT, or they were responsible, kind of like, I mean, like, yeah, I'm sure they weren't like the main impact, but they were a significant contribution to the anti-KMT forces. And then so around 48, 49, they start coming back, right? Because the civil war is kind of ending, and then, the KMT is retreating to Taiwan. So those forces are kind of starting to come back. And Kim Il-sung's like, yo, they're killing our fucking people. The fucking Jap collaborators are running the fucking country, and they're killing our people. And they're letting we're just trading Japan for America as imperialist fucking, we're just trading imperialists, basically, is what it was saying. And it was true, right? And so he's petitioning to Mao, like, yo, we got to do something about this. And then Mao's like, I don't want to get into a conflict with the Americans. Like, look, we're just getting this shit off the ground, all right, Mr. Kim. We need so maybe if you go to Stalin and get his say so and his approval, then yeah, I will guarantee my forces to back you if you get approval from Stalin. So he asked Stalin multiple times, hey, my people are getting fucked up here. I know we need to fucking do something about this, blah, blah, blah. Now, Stalin, he's dealing with shit in Western Europe. That's taking up most of his attention, right? The Berlin Wall and all this other fucking shit. The fucking Iron Curtain speech from Churchill and all this other fucking bullshit of the Cold War. And, yeah. His focus is on Germany, right? Because that's what that actually, represented an existential threat to the Soviet Union from World War II. So his attention's not really 100% on Asia at this point. And so he's kind of like, I don't know about that. I don't know about, like, he was basically saying, if you can get, I think I switched the order. I think Stalin was the one who's like, if you can get Mao's guarantee that he'll back you, then I'll give you the go ahead. So finally, when the forces come back in 1949, they kind of like assemble the forces, and basically he gets the green light. I think the green light happens soon after the end of the Civil War. So he was basically like, okay, I think from what I've read, I'm not 100% sure, but I think from their own plans, they were going to invade in the fall. Because the thing is, most of the equipment that they had, they weren't getting anything after the the American military, I think the Soviet military, they leave in 1947 out of North Korea. So all their equipment is only 1947 on. The Soviets do not give them any more stuff past that because, they don't want to, seem like they're aggressors or whatever the case may be. So they don't actually get any supplies from the Soviet Union. They just get the permission to go ahead. And I guess the idea is that the Soviets would give them air support right at the border if they started to come to the border. But I don't think like the Soviets gave any more logistical support other than that, other than saying you can go ahead, right? Because the Soviets didn't want to get involved with America at all. They didn't want that smoke at that time. They wanted to Taqiyya. They wanted to bide their time, build their strength, right? So then, hold on. Live chat. Okay. So then, what happens then? So they're building all the forces, and from my reading, I think they were trying to attack around the fall. Because if you know anything about Soviet tanks, they're built mainly for colder weather, right? That's the whole reason fucking Barbarossa kind of had to stall in December of 41 because, the Panzer tanks couldn't really maneuver in the cold winter snow as well. And Soviet tanks were more built for that kind of shit because they're in cold weather. So the Soviet tanks that they got from the Soviet Union, they were not as good for the summertime. Because if you know anything about Korean summers, it's hot and it's humid as fuck. It's like, and when it's that wet, the fucking roads are muddy and shit, and all this shit is muddy. So it's hard to like travel effectively when the roads are that muddy and whatever, especially when you're in tanks that are built for like more winter weather or more like solid, when the roads are more solid, right? So what ends up happening is after the 48 kind of Jeju massacre, that's kind of like when I think Kim Il-sung's like boosting his requests to Stalin. And in 49, there's also like Korean guerrillas in South Korea now. I call them the Korea Kong, like the Viet Cong, but Korea Kong, because it's South Korean communists instead of South Vietnamese communists. So they're the Korean Kong in South Korea. They were kind of like rising up. They were guerrilla fighters that were trying to like, and they were led by the South Korean communist leader who was named Park Han-young. And during 49, all these guerrilla activities are happening all throughout South Korea. And so basically Park Han-young tells Kim Il-sung, hey, if you come down here, there is enough of a resistance party that we will be able to crush the resistance really fast and really easily. It's like the people will rise up. there's enough guerrilla fighters here that the people will rise up, and it won't matter what the fucking Americans do or their fucking Korean Jap forces, because the people will rise up, right? That's the idea. So, like, you can come down. We're good to go here. It's basically like, you got the green light. You got the green light from Sung. You got the green light from me. Let's go. Let's do this shit, right? Park Han-yeon said that. I probably didn't say it like that, but you know what I'm talking about. And so in 1950, in June 22nd, everyone thinks that North Korea started it. And ostensibly, they were going to invade at some point. But from what I've read, it sounded like they weren't quite ready just yet. But because of the feint that South Korea, like, thrust with, it was never meant for a thrust all the way. It was meant as a provocation thrust. So that, like, so basically in military, or this is my basic understanding of military, but, like, basically, you know, if a force is trying to invade you and they fail that initial thing, then it's the opportunity to pounce on that mistake and go forward. But I think the North Koreans were somewhat fooled, because I don't think the South Korean forces were intending to ever invade all the way into the north, and they weren't committing that much of their forces. So the North Korean army, I think, was fooled into thinking that South Korea overcommitted, and now the counterattack was valid. Because when you notice the history of the events, for 6 weeks before June 22nd, Seokmin Ri says nothing about North Korea. He's like, for 4 years before that, or 4 or 5 years before that, he was like, we need to kill the North Koreans. We need to get them. We need to take their territory. We need to, like, fight them now, blah, 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 all this shit. He was, like, saying that every day for 6 weeks before June 22nd. And then with Chiang Kai-shek, you know, he was buddy-buddy with Chiang Kai-shek. And in 1949, we all know the KMT was like, oh, fuck, we're licking our wounds. Mao's going to come after us now. How the fuck are we going to get out of this one? You know, we're on this tiny fucking island. And America's staying out of this conflict. Because it doesn't want to look like it's imposing. So how the fuck are we going to get out of this one, Mr. Chiang Kai-shek? Well, it turns out Chiang Kai-shek called his buddy up, probably, Seokmin Ri, and was like, yo, let's start some shit. Let's start some shit. So I'm guessing that they both talked to Dougie MacArthur and was like, let's come up with a plan so it looks like they struck first. And the evidence is that you have all these landmines, right? The landmines that were given to the South Korean army to defend against an invasion. But on the day of June 22nd, 1950, none of those mines were laid. So the KPA had almost like a straight line to Pusan. But that's where they dug in their heels. That's where they built their defenses. That's where they kind of like, you know, this is like Custard's last stand. And so you see that the North Koreans from June 22nd to I think like September, or no, June, July, I think they drive all the way. Let me see, actually. So the Busan perimeter, they reached them in September. So in 3 months, they basically reach Busan. And they're about to push them into the sea. And they're nearly successful, except for the Incheon landing that Douglas MacArthur made and made them retreat. So they were very close to winning, but they had to pull back once MacArthur made that landing because they they were not going to be able to fight UN forces one-on-one. That's for fucking sure. So that's the Taqiyya. They realized we can't. The America's in the war now. We gotta retreat, right? We can't fucking fight these bombers and these napalm and all this shit. So they went all the way back to the Yalu, all the way back, and I think around November there. I think around October, the UN forces retake Seoul. Right, so they capture Seoul initially, and then the UN retakes Seoul, and then MacArthur makes the decision without UN approval to go past the 38th. I think he might have done it even without Truman's approval. And meanwhile, the entire time, China's like, look, you got past the 30. I mean, you got what you accomplished. Now stop at the 38th, and let's deal with it now. But you're coming very, very fucking close to our borders. You come any closer, we're gonna have to fucking intervene, right? So that's what China's saying. China's saying, like, look, we can make some negotiations here about whatever, blah blah blah, but you're coming awful close here. So in December, that's what happens. MacArthur's like, we'll have our boys like in November, I think. He was like, we'll have our boys home by Christmas. Some other journalists joked, like, at the time, they made a joke like, well, he said it'd be done by Christmas, but he didn't just specify which Christmas. Because MacArthur just thought that the Chinese were going to roll over and that it would be an easy victory and there was no chance in hell that they were going to lose. But then, Chinese use encirclement tactics and basically push back the fucking, like, the UN forces. They actually take Seoul again for the second time. They push them back. But then I think they finally, the UN forces push a little bit back again, and by 1951, by June of 1951, I think the war is pretty much decided, and they're kind of just like at that border the entire time, kind of like it's like trench warfare at that point. Nobody's gaining any ground left or right, so they start negotiations, and negotiations take like 2 fucking years. Because, like, obviously the whites don't want to concede to anything, right? And they're fucking scum. And so, yeah, they just wanted to kill as many Korean people as possible. So that's what they did. They killed millions of Korean people, including 1 million South Koreans. Yeah, that's right. You heard me right. 1 million South Korean civilians were killed during the Korean War. Because they didn't care if you were South or North. They just fucking bombed the shit out of the entire country. So, yeah. Our greatest ally, right? Our greatest ally. It kind of sounds like Israel. Our greatest ally just fucking killing us and assassinating us and doing shit. Who the fuck knows? And so that's kind of like the start of the relationship between China and North Korea. They kind of had a mutual interest. China obviously didn't want American militaries right at their fucking border, right? So China sees North Korea kind of as like a buffer to American forces. And the DPRK obviously is grateful for Chinese sacrifices. I think they lost like 500,000 soldiers, 500,000 people in the war, including Mao's own son. So, yeah, I would say that soon afterwards, I think they signed, I guess, like a defense pact. It's the only pact that China has signed still today. So China and North Korea basically have a defense pact saying an attack on one is attack on both. So they're the only country that has that pact with China. So already, like North Korea kind of like occupies a special spot, but it's also kind of like a little bit of like a weird situation because, you know, um, they were both like helped by the Soviet Union and China, right? Initially, their economy needed a lot of help, right? Because they just bombed to shit. So they got a lot of, they got a lot of grain and stuff because they can't really like. The north part isn't as arable as the south. It's a little colder there. South is a lot more. You can grow stuff, grow food better, and so they didn't have their own agricultural resources because of that, the Japanese developed or industrialized the north more than the south because they made the southern kind of like Koreans just like grow food and agriculture and shit, and they made the northern be like, factory workers, right? So you kind of already had a little bit of that infrastructure in place. Like a lot of that was fucking bombed to shit, of course, by the Americans. But you still kind of had that like technical wherewithal, no human capital and people who can kind of like develop that shit pretty quickly. And so they got aid and assistance from the Soviets mostly because they were the richer country at the time, right? But then China also helped them out as well. Because yeah. But in the 1950s, because of the Korean War and because of the, growing Vietnam or the first Indochina War with France and Vietnam, the United States just sanctioned China. They called it their own nuclear weapon against China. Basically, they just wanted to starve as many people as possible. And then from China's perspective, they had just gotten this war from fucking America, and they're getting sanctioned. And now the Soviets have disowned Stalin, and Mao's like, "What the fuck is this? This is fucking bullshit. You're just like you're basically betraying the revolution by shit talking the guy who basically saved the fucking Soviet Union." And so from China's perspective, they were like, fuck the Soviet Union. We can't trust these guys. We got to go our own way. And we got to get more influence. Like the Soviet Union has Eastern Europe, right? Under their influence. We got to maintain the East Asian and Southeast Asian states as our territory, because now it became almost like a race between the two of like who can expand their own communist influence more. And so Kim Il-sung is kind of like stuck between a rock and a hard place here. Especially after, all the fucking turmoil of the Great Leap Forward. And then even the fucking Cultural Revolution, right? You had Red Guard saying Kim Il-sung was a revisionist. You had people killing ethnic Koreans in Manchuria area. The Red Guards were killing some ethnic Koreans, like saying Kim Il-sung is a traitor to the revolution. And so it was a little hairy back then. It was a little, and then, they're also very sympathetic to Vietnam, but then obviously once the more brutal parts of the Vietnam are happening. Now the Sino-Soviet split is even worse. And they're like literally threatening to nuke each other. So then North Korea is kind of like, both Vietnam and North Korea are like, can we like not do this? But I think the relationship between Mao and Kim was kind of interesting as well, because Mao and Ho Chi Minh were around the same age. Like, Ho Chi Minh was a little older. But Kim Il-sung is at least 20 years younger than Mao, right? Because he was born in 1893, and Kim Il-sung was born in 1912. So that's a 19-year difference. So when Kim Il-sung takes over... So Kim Il-sung is around 41 at the end of the Korean War, right? So that would make Mao 60. So you can kind of see that they're in different parts of their like just lives in general. Um, and so Kim Il Sung is kind of like he has respect for elders too. Like we're all Asian. We kind of like you know I think like he understood that Mao had to do what he had to do. And I don't think he took anything personally about what China did uh, from about Mao. But it is kind of just like there were times when, like how the Chinese were somewhat complaining about Soviet imperialism, where there were times where, I feel like North Korea has been like, you guys are kind of doing the same chauvinistic bullshit yourselves, Not enough to be like fuck you China, right? But just like, hey, you want to kind of check yourself there a little bit, buddy. I know the Chinese ultras hate when I bring this up. And obviously for the most part, I am pro China. Obviously, I'm not saying that I'm pro America over pro China. That's fucking sure when it comes to North Korea and Vietnam. But what I am saying is that no one's always right. No country is always right. No, even fucking Deng Xiaoping was like, look, Stalin was 70-30, Mao was 70-30, I'm probably 50-50. I'm gonna get things wrong. And yeah, it was a tough time during the 1950s, 1960s, and then also during that time, during the Vietnam War, Kim Il Sung is being kind of like, hey, it looks like the Americans are distracted here. Let's try to take the South. So they do some stuff that's not considered kosher today, like kidnapping Japanese people or trying to assassinate Park Chung-hee. I'm not going to say that the North Koreans themselves were perfect, either. They made some interesting choices that I probably would have advised against unless they had a better insight into those things. Because, like, I'm just like, if you're going to do that, you better make sure you got guys that can finish the fucking job. Because if they don't, well, now you've given them pretext. And that's why I think... that's the biggest reason I think America gave all these concessions to South Korea during the 1960s in terms of protectionism and industrialization, especially to Park Chung-hee, kind of being like, because Park Chung-hee is probably telling Americans, look, these North Koreans, they're gonna come. You gotta make us rich. You gotta make us powerful, or we can't defend against them. And so the Americans were like, yeah, we don't want to spend our money and resources defending you guys. Why don't we make you a rich country so that you could take care of the defense yourselves and just be our vassal? Well, that's what they were thinking in their minds, of course. So in 1965, they get Park Chung-hee to get down on his knees and suck Jap cock, get hundreds of millions of dollars from the Japs as grants and loans from their zaibatsu, getting their zaibatsu kind of experts to help start their chaebol companies, like the steel stuff and the car companies. That's why a lot of the buildings in South Korea and Seoul resemble the stuff you see in Tokyo. Like the build quality is very similar. All this shit is very similar from Tokyo and Seoul in terms of the industrialization. And that's why, because they're in the 1960s, they were like, hey, we need Jap money and Jap expertise to help us make our fucking, help their zaibatsu make our fucking chaebol shit go. And so North Korea was like, fuck, this is our time to strike. Let's go. But they didn't quite have enough to get the job done. And they were always wary of America coming back. Even though they were getting their asses handed to them in Vietnam, it's you don't want to give them a pretext to because they were threatening nukes all the time. And that's why in North Korea, you have all these underground, like, no one's seen it, obviously, except for North Koreans. But they have, like, tunnels. They have, like, extensive tunnel systems, like, You know the fucking, you know where Zion, you know where Zion the Matrix comes from? That comes from North Korea. That's what the North Koreans actually have. The city of Zion, there is a city of Zion underneath probably Pyongyang or something, you know. Probably not Pyongyang. It's probably like in the mountains too, like the Paektusan like fucking mountains. They've like have caves under the mountains so that like if the mountains get nuked, they have a whole mountain of protection. You know, shit like that probably. I don't know. Who nobody knows for sure, right? Because they keep their secrets intact. They kill any CIA agents that come in the country. It is a fucking black box in North Korea for this specific reason. Because they know that nukes could come at any time. You are the first person who told me what honeypot is. Now there's Russian spies writing a book about how Chinese and Russia use girls to get info from countries. We are cooked. I mean, that's just projection. That book is just fake news. It's more the other way around. They use probably more Jewish honeypots, like Kash Patel, right? I heard the story of North Korean commandos sharing cigarettes with South Korean farmers en route to assassinate Park Chung-hee. The farmers then snitched, but the commanders got really close. See, that's retarded. I'm sorry. If I'm saying kill Park Chung-hee, it should probably be implicit, like not talking to anyone until you get the job done. It's probably implied in the fucking directive, you know? Why would you ever fucking talk to stop along? Hey man, you want to smoke some cigarettes from North Korea? By the way, we're gonna kill Park Chung-hee. Don't tell anyone we're here though. You know, we're smoking some cigarettes. Like what the fuck? Jeez. Anyhow. So that's kind of the relationship during the Cold War. I don't know what else you wanted to know. I don't know much more. Curry pot, yeah, exactly. Curry pot. Did I answer your question, Steve? I don't know if that sufficed. Or did you want to know anything else or specifically? But anyway, yeah, by 79, the KCIA took out Park Chung-hee. But then 1980, what happened? Chunde-won takes over. This is kind of like the ending stage of the Soviet Union. And so at this point, South Korean economy starts to take off. Their industrialization starts to take off. And they start to leave North Korean industrialization in the dust. And this is due to a bunch of reasons, factors, right? Like, you know, China was going through its own fucking turmoil, and like and you know, with the Cultural Revolution and the other stuff, they weren't getting Jap money or Jap industry expertise. That's for sure. Even the Chinese, they were still developing their own industry, so they weren't getting experts from there. And then by the 1980s, you know, the Soviets are basically crumbling. So I'm guessing that they don't really have that many experts from there either at that point. And once the Soviet Union falls, now they've lost their primary trade partner, especially in petroleum. Petroleum, as you know, is very important for industrialization. I was just reading about England's initial industrialization. What do they have? They started with coal and iron, and railroads, right? So North Korea, there was a lot of coal. There was iron and railroads as well that the Japs left behind. But they didn't quite have oil. And oil was, like, after World War II, that became the standard of industrialization. Like, you couldn't do stuff without oil. And so after 1990, they lost their handle on oil, and then, or 1991, and then China, you know, because it's sort of like commercialized and stuff like that with America and kind of good relations. When America sanctions North Korea for not agreeing to the nuclear non-proliferation shit, they kind of kick North Korea to the curb a little bit there. They agree to the sanctions. And then during this time, in 1994, Kim Il-sung passes away, right? At the age of 82, he passes away. And, you know, the combination of, you know, end of the Cold War, Kim Il-sung dying, and then there's like a once in a 300-year monsoon or some shit that like just creates a total famine in the country. So the perfect storm of events just fucking totally crushes the North Korean economy and agricultural output. Because, like I said before, they don't really have arable land. I mean, now they do, because of the fucking arduous march, as they call it, in the 1990s, they built up their own stuff, like keeping with the principles of Juche, right? And that kind of like more solidified Juche, within the country, of like autarky, of like being self-reliant first in the economy, and then, you know, anything more you can kind of like develop, having the basics down for your own survival first, and having that be self-sufficient. And so during the so that's why some North Koreans kind of have a love-hate relationship with China now. They're kind of like, well, you guys are kind of hypocrites. Kind of kicked us to the curb. But, you know, what are we gonna do? It's not like we're not gonna like surrender and give up to South Korea or America, right? Not gonna do that. But it's just kind of like, yeah, what the fuck was up with that? And I mean, now it kind of makes I think like North Korea understands it made sense at the time, right? If China crumbled, that means we would all be in fucking trouble, right? And China was obviously trying to avoid the fate of the Soviet Union. They saw that the Russians and the Soviets basically were too influenced by this fucking commercial success of, you know, Western capitalism, of like just all this fucking products that they can have or whatever, or you know, shit like that. Like cheap consumer goods. That's what a lot of people within the Soviet Union started to want and demand. So then Deng Xiaoping was like, how about we get fucking rich? But we retain the political power. We separate it, obviously, from the fucking bourgeoisie so that they can't fucking control the government. And then once we hit certain sort of benchmarks, we can take back the liberalization. We can cut back and nationalize certain industries that are mature. And that's how we're going to fucking get to communism. And like, you know, people have even been like, oh, why is China trading with Israel? Oh, how could they do that? Aren't they such hypocrites? I was like, well, you fucking retard. In the 1980s and the 1990s, you know, Chinese military and the Chinese technology wasn't what it is today. Like, China being this advanced is fairly fucking recent. You know? Not too long ago, all you retards were being like, "Oh, China, they're just fucking barbarians, and you know they're working in sweatshops like for 50 bajillion hours a day, and all the cheap shit comes from China, right? Like they're all fucking saying that just 10 years ago, 10 15 years ago. And now they're like, well, China has all this power. Why is it trading with Israel now? I'm like, do you know what they're getting from Israel? Do you know why they're trading with Israel? They're not trading it because for their own health, right? They're not trading it just to get money from Israel. They're trading it to buy Israeli weapons and technology. Because guess what? A lot of Israeli weapons and technology come from America. And so when you buy those things, when you buy these weapons, you can analyze them. You can be like, hey, how do we defend against this shit? How do we build our own shit that's like this? Is this something we can replicate? Is this something we can reverse engineer? What do you think? All these fucking retards about in like tech bros who are like, oh, China can't innovate. And then now you're saying, like, why are they trading with Israel? This is the one thing they're literally stealing the technology for. Like all that other shit, that's just fucking copium. But yeah, military technology. Yeah, who had the best military tech in the world for the longest time? It was fucking America. And by proxy, Israel. Because they know America's not going to trade them that shit. They're not going to fucking ask America for that. Because America's never going to do that shit. But with Israel, it's different. Because Israel isn't thinking about America's best interests. Israel's thinking about Israel's best interests. So Deng Xiaoping was like, you know what, Israel? Yeah, we defend your right to exist, you know. A little Taqiyya, you know. A little hide your strength, bide your time from Mr. Deng Xiaoping. You know, you don't want to tell Israel what you're up to. You want to pretend like you're their friend so you can get that fucking sweet, you know, F-16 technology or that F-18, F-22, F-35, all the Fs, right? And so it's like, now I understand. Now I understand why they didn't say shit when America's just making fun of them. Making fun of the Chinese for being backward, making fun of them for being like cheap and products made in China. Ha ha ha, that sucks. You suck, China. China's like, yeah, we do suck. Oh, we need your help. You know, it was kind of like a little bit of Socrates going on. A little bit of like, oh yeah, we are weak. Yeah, so we need your help. Oh, you're right. We need your help. So help us. But yeah, exactly, Illustrious. You could see the other side. Pajit's getting it from all ends these days. Modi is just being smart enough to lay low and shut his mouth, you know. Say cheap made in China shit. But it's just kind of like, that's all Jeets have. Jeets only have copium, you know. I was reading this tweet thread by Maitreya. I forgot his last name. His name's Maitreya. He's like this Indian guy I follow. I think he's Indian British. I'm not 100% sure. But he's very critical of India. He's a communist. And he's just kind of like, yeah, can you guys stop being retarded? But then he goes into like why that is. Apparently there was some stat where like only like 4%. Only 4% of the country or something like that have passports, and only 7% have actually left the country before, or something crazy like that. And so, I mean, with a country like India, it seems like a lot, right? Because 4% of a billion is 40 million, and 4% or 1.5 billion is 60 million, right? So you have 60 million Jeets traveling all around the world. So it seems like a lot of Indians, right? Because that's the size of a lot of countries. But when you compare it to the entire country, you're just kind of like, oh, shit. Sup, Tarkan? The topic is Taqiyya. The topic is hide your strength and bide your time. That's the topic. That's the theme of what I'm talking about. It's a meta narrative that I'm going with. I can't say much more than that. But if you know, you know. All I'll say, it's kind of related to... So in 1963, JFK is assassinated in November, right? And the Nation of Islam, so Malcolm X is with the Nation of Islam at this point. And when he says, when JFK is assassinated, somebody asks about him, like, hey, what do you think about the Kennedy assassination? And then he says to the reporter, or whatever, journalist, he says something like, well, that's what happens when the chickens come home to roost. When the chickens come home to roost, I'm not sad, but I'm glad. Or something like that, right? Basically, essentially saying Kennedy got what was coming to him. Like, if America keeps bullying all these other countries all around the world, something is going to fight back. Something's going to bite you back in the ass. You played with fire, and you got what was coming for you. And this was heavily unpopular, obviously, at the time. Kennedy was a very popular president. And so even the Nation of Islam, this black nationalist super anti-white organization, they were like, oh, wait, we don't know this guy. We don't they made Malcolm X have a gag order, which basically made him leave the organization entirely, and he went to fucking Mecca in 1964 for pretty much a year, kind of like as a pilgrimage to fucking actual Islam. Because, like, the Nation of Islam, they were teaching him the fucking kooky ass fucking Yaqub shit about the white man and Yaqub building the white man in a lab or some shit 5,000 years ago. That was the shit the Nation of Islam believed in. And then when Malcolm X went to the Middle East, kind of asked around about it, and they were like, what? So that's when Malcolm X realized, oh, these Nation of Islam cats, they're spewing a bit of fucking nonsense, you know? And then Malcolm X comes out with the Zionist logic piece where he talks about Israel, because he's learning all about Israel from the Middle Eastern guys, and basically says, yeah, their logic doesn't even fucking make sense, blah, blah, blah. He returns to America, I think late 64, might have been early 65, late 64, early 65, something like that. Helps out in Selma, Martin Luther King's stuff, with their voting drive in 1964. So he actually helps Martin Luther King soon before his death. And then he goes February to New York City, back to New York City. In February, New York City of 1965, that's where he was assassinated. He was assassinated in Harlem, I believe, where mysteriously NYPD officers that were supposed to be posted there were not there. And he's supposedly killed by Nation of Islam people. So, yeah, that's why I gotta be Taqiyya, you know? That's why I gotta practice some Taqiyya right now. China does have a demographic issue, not as severe as Japan and Korea. However, unlike Japan and Korea, the Chinese government actually has the power and political will enforce change. Actually, it's now worse than Japan, 1 kid on average. Well, there were 1 kid on average for a long time before that, too. That was policy motivated. That'd be funny if, like, China said you must have 2 child, like a obligatory 2-child policy. Look, if you're cheering for things not to change, like xenophobic white trash media, I'm not going to waste time arguing, but nothing in China stays static for long, so unless you actually live there. I have family members in China. They all got, like, 3 kids and are in their 20s. Oh, nice. Calling doom and gloom is just obnoxious. Nothing in China stays static for long, blah, blah, blah. obviously it's about forcing people to have kids, about removing as many obstacles as possible. I think you mean it's not about forcing people to have kids. I'm assuming you mean that. But yeah, I agree. I agree. It's just kind of like, I think what's happening in China is that they drank a little bit, like Deng Xiaoping kind of warned a little bit. He was like, yeah, we might get some liberalism in here, but we can manage it. And I think they have, but the fact remains that there is some liberalism, especially in the more cosmopolitan cities in China. And those people are influenced heavily by Western propaganda, Western anti-family, like feminist fucking retarded propaganda. That I know a lot of the richer Chinese people, especially in Shanghai, are kind of like into, you know. They're kind of like boba liberal light, right? Not quite a boba liberal, but they got some liberalism to them. It's not a boba liberal then. I guess it would be more like a dumpling liberal, because dumplings are more Chinese, I think, right? I don't know. In rural areas, they are birthing kids out like crazy. Well, there you go. There you go. And as long as people are having children, you know, it's not like America where the stock of the children is important as well. No. No, in China, see, if the rural areas, if they're popping them out like crazy, like if there's a talented rural kid, they'll be going to a good fucking school and probably one of the cities being like sent to that. You know, there's opportunities available for people all over the country, as long as they have that talent. It's not perfect still, of course. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but it's getting there, right? It's improving, right? That's the thing. That's the thing about China, like, or anything communist. It's like, first of all, nothing is fucking perfect. Like, nobody said communism was perfect. Like, no, Marx even said, like, we're not utopians, right? Utopian socialism has been tried before by like Robert Owen, Saint Simon, Fourier, Cabet. They tried that shit. They tried that in America. They tried to build these like communal societies in America that would be like kind of like utopian communists, but it didn't fucking work out. So they understand there's nothing is fucking perfect. You know, Marxists say don't think that like, oh, we're perfect and everything we do is great and awesome. It's like, no, we're gonna fucking make mistakes. But yeah, that's the other thing too, Wong Wen-Chan. When you have 1.4 billion people, you can probably kind of tank population decline. When you're South Korea though, and you only got 50 million people, and your birth rate is less than 0.7, then you got a problem. Then you got a significant fucking problem. When your population is such that in Japan, I think it's 120 million or so, or 110 million. And I think they lost, like, what was it? What was... 554,000 people. Let me see what Korea's was. .1. So it seems like Japan has had a lead on lower birth rates than Korea has. It's just that Korea's is now lower than even Japan's. But Japan has had a low birth rate for a long time. But 550,000 people. That's how much Japan's population declined by in last year. It was 0.1% in Korea, which implies... Wait, what does that imply? I think it was 50,000. So South Korea dropped by 50,000 people. 50 million, population around 50 million. Japan dropped by around 500,000. Okay. I think that's around 0.5%, which is, yeah. And so shit's pretty bad there because They're not changing their, fucking politics anytime soon, unless there's a socialist revolution. And where China, it's just kind of like, I mean, have you been to Chinese cities? We could, like Wang Oni Chan says, we could use a little less crowding. Um, and the thing about China too is because it's communist and because it's so high tech, they have the most robots. They have more robots than everywhere else combined, like in factories and shit. So they're way on their way to automating a lot of fucking essential labor. Like I'm sure, like agriculture and all the basic like necessities of life, like the basics, like food, shelter, water, clothing. They are working to get that all fucking. So by the time there is any significant population decline in China, which probably happen in another, probably start. Wait, let me see. Oh shit, 1.39 million drop actually. But compared to Japan, that might seem like a lot of people, but compared to Japan, that's actually lower in proportion by a factor of, yeah, a lot, I think. Because Japan, I think China has over 10 times as many people. So for China to even reach Japan levels, even more than that, I think, more than 10 times. So then they would have to lose 5 million people to be at the level Japan's losing people at. But anyway, so they'll lose people for sure, right? But I think they'll A, have enough automation and robots to make up the labor shortage. And B, they have a communist government that'll figure it out. Like illustrious media said. So COVID killed a lot of people who we never repopulated. All the world is fucked. And not only that, like, yeah. Let's see. It's been around for 5,000 years. It's not going to go extinct in a lifetime. Population will drop, but eventually stabilize and move towards a new equilibrium, befitting the changing standard of living, education, cultural norms. But the West wants is to push a narrative of gloom and doom and hopelessness on China so that all change will be negative. Yeah, that's what I agree. I don't buy any of the fucking bullshit. Well, that's a Malthusian jibber jabber thing. Um, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the idea that population of the world cannot sustainably. If you're talking about the way the world is industrialized now under capitalism, yes, I would agree with you. That is unsustainable because we are using resources in a way that is wasteful and not self-sustaining. But under a communist society, I think we can still grow the population. If the world had a communist world government that kind of like, and there was no more fucking wars and people were just able to fucking produce and live happily, you know. That's a long time from now. That's probably not in any of our lifetimes, by the way. And I'm not claiming that it is possible, but shit. Why is this? Oh, there we go. Anyhow, yeah. I mean, there's just so much possibility too. Like, I think China's starting to like terraform its deserts. You know, it's doing all this environmental stuff that's helping the fucking Earth like not be dead anymore. But China know it has the capacity to make choices and look at choosing upwards, hopefully, whatever white trash genocidal media is constantly pushing. And you know what other country shows fucking genocidal media? Japan. They make the most nihilistic, doomer, black-pilled bullshit all the fucking time for the past 40 years. You know where it all comes from? It all comes from being cucked to America. It all comes from the Plaza Accords. The Japs are feeling themselves. They got back on track by 1960, right? They're fully on pace with the rest of the Western countries in 1960. They're feeling themselves. All right. This is not a debate, Mr. Dreamy Joker. I'm going to put you in 24-hour timeout. You are fucking annoying me. We don't debate the correctness or the incorrectness of Marxism on this channel. If you want to debate that, you can go somewhere else. But this is not a fucking democracy here. This is dictatorship of the Dugatariat. And I don't fucking care about your bullshit fucking beliefs or political opinions, because they're irrelevant to my interests. So if you want to like bullshit and talk about nonsense fucking bullshit, do it somewhere else. That's all. That's all. And that's why I only gave you 24-hour. Maybe you can come back when you don't fucking spew bullshit. But this is not the place. This is not a forum for debate. Anyhow, got hit by 2 bombs. So in the 1960s, exactly. So they're feeling themselves in the 1960s. They're growing. They're on top of the fucking technological food chain by the 1980s. And then they just self-cuck. They allow Toshiba to get fucking mutilated by American Wall Street corporations. And then they fucking, basically America's like, stay in your fucking lane. Just make us cars and video games, you dumb Japs, and cameras. Just make us cars, video games, cameras, and make, weeb content for our retards. And, what else? What else do we buy from the Japs? Cameras, cars, anime, writing utensils that are pretty good, sushi, ramen, Send us all that shit. But as far as transistors, we got to protect Silicon Valley here, so get the fuck out. Which is also retarded because, the funny story about TSMC is the founder of TSMC was a Chinese national working at Texas Instruments. And they were so racist, they made him leave the country to start his own fucking transistor company. Hello Kitty, ramen is Chinese. Well, there you go. They can't even send us fucking ramen because it's Chinese. Send us adult women in schoolgirl outfits with thigh gap. I mean, that's what they do with their anime, right? And that's basically what happened, And then in the 1990s, they make all this fucking gross like people like fucking Quentin Tarantino make this gross fucking weeb content. Like, in the 1980s, there was a lot of hate towards Japs because they're like the fucking car workers. They killed Vincent Chin thinking he was Japanese. You're like, oh, there were pictures of retarded Americans like trashing a like Japanese TV in her car or some shit. Like, that's what they were fucking doing. That's not how fucking retarded Americans are. In the 1980s, they were just smashing TVs or whatever. And I'm like, did you see NVIDIA is partnering with Palantir? I mean, Zionists and Taiwanists, am I right? I mean, who would have seen it coming? Who would have seen it coming that the Taiwanese CEO would team up with a Zionist Sauron, Eye of Sauron company? Who would have seen that? Who would have seen that coming? You know, you got Alex Karp managing Palantir, and you got fucking Jensen Huang managing Nvidia. Well, Nvidia is partnering with everyone, right? They're just making a shit ton of money. Like, I guess AI is everything. AI. Oh. How's that song? Old MacDonald had a farm. AI. Or should I say, Nvidia had a GPU farm. AI. Jensen was in Korea eating Korean fried chicken. Yeah, he's like, whatever. It's just like, this whole thing is a fucking bubble. And this is all gonna come fucking crashing down. Like, I think the American economy, it's fucking running on fumes, man. Like, people are losing jobs left and right. You know, nobody makes anything real anymore. Everyone's just trying to sell like these fucking AI slop shit all the time. But I don't know. I don't know how it's all going to shake out. It's just not looking good. And, you know, I've been thinking lately. What good is it here? What good is it here when everyone hates you because you're a fucking chink, right? You're a fucking chink. Nobody likes you in America. No, they all want you to go back to China anyway. So you know what? I know I've said this before and I've still said this, but like, I'm feeling that again today. Today for a very specific reason. Because it seems like no matter what, the white man's on top. The white man's protected. The white man who's white as fuck and does a lot of white fucking shit is protected. That's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing in America. No matter what you do, at the end of the day, there's a white man that's white. You can kind of guess what I'm talking about, but I can't say what I'm talking about. So just imagine what I'm talking about, I guess. Just imagine. So that's why I'm just kind of like, you know what? Why even fucking bother being here anymore? You know, I should just fucking go to China and just live happily ever after. Like, what the fuck am I doing? It's like my stupid fucking parents refuse to leave this fucking Nazi godforsaken degenerate country. And so I'm just like anchored here. I'm like a literal anchor baby, but I don't want the anchor. Or I want to wait, no. I have anchor parents. And I want to throw the anchor into China. Or even just like send them to South Korea. At least they'll be fucking taken care of. But I don't know. Back on the boat. Yeah, that's right. Fob to Bob. We're getting back on the boat. That's what I'm gonna start a company called Back on the Boat. And it's basically repatriating back to Asia. Repatriating Asian Americans back to their home country. Giving them the step-by-step, you know, setting up services. You know. Get back on the boat. B-O-B. Get back. G-Bob. You know, this is like all fucking bullshit nonsense. Like these fucking Western barbarians telling me all this fucking bullshit. and being like, oh, I know how to do communism. I was like, no, you don't, you dumb fuck. You're fucking white and you're retarded. You're not Asian. No non-Asian country has done communism successfully and maintained it. Russia fucked that shit up. They did okay for like 36 years. And then the Asian guy, or the Eurasian guy, died. And then the Nikita Khrushchev came in. And then Brezhnev came in. And then Gorbachev came in. They all three of them just fucked it all up. You know, Lenin was a quarter Kalmyk. Stalin was Georgian. So they were Asian. Or they got the Asiatic blood in them. They made it work. They made the Soviet Union work. But the whites... Yikes, guys. Yikes, Nikita. Yikes. Gorbachev, yikes. That's you guys. That's the white people. You guys didn't do it right. And Cuba, don't even get me started on Cuba. You fucking kidding me? No. No. Incorrect. Didn't do it right. Now you got fucking trans surgery happening in Cuba. Great. You fell for the bourgeois bullshit. But yeah, it was Asians. It was Asians the entire time. You know? I hate to sound like an Asian supremacist, but the proof is in the fucking pudding. I mean, am I wrong? What countries have done communism correctly? And even the non-communist countries, you know, the Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, they developed fucking quick as fuck. You know? And not with that much help, to be honest. Like, yeah, I talk about how Korea, blah, 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 benefited from the Jap money and the comfort women money and the fucking mercenary money and the selling off leftist kids to adoptee money and all this fucking shit. But still, that wasn't that much money in the grand scheme of things in the economy back in the 1960s. Because guess what? Park Chung-hee had Marxist training. He employed a lot of the Stalinist changes to South Korea. And Japan, you know, they already industrialized, so they already knew what they were doing. Taiwan, same kind of thing. They had the experts from the KMT. They had a lot of the fucking, you know, human capital stuff for that. Singapore as well. They all fucking developed at lightning speed. They're all more advanced than European countries today. You know, European countries who had fucking head starts. Like, so much imperialist head starts, you know? And it's like... yeah. Like, white supremacy doesn't even fucking make sense anymore because of Asia. That's why white people hate Asians the most, actually. White people don't actually hate black people or Hispanic people or even Muslim people that much. They see them as children. They see them as people who aren't as advanced as them. So they're racist still, sure. But they almost see them as like a non-issue to them. It's Asian people that challenge the paradigm of white supremacy the most, especially because of the past 70, 80 years of our economic development out of pretty much fucking nowhere. Like, Japan was the only country that was pretty much developed industrially. And even they were bombed to fucking shit during World War II. But, you know, all of China developed, and then fucking Japan, South Korea, they're fucking advanced fucking countries. And so when, you know, white people are like, we built society, we built the world, everyone should be grateful to us. Like, you know what? It sticks a fucking, you know, plank in that fucking narrative. It's Asian people. Because it's like, wait a second. Not only is that not true, But now we're advancing past you, you dumb fucks. Now you are the barbarians again, just like in 1840. 200 years ago, you were the barbarians then, and you just came up with the steam engine. You used fucking Newton's calculus, came up with the steam engine, and made those fucking boats, those steamboats that fucking killed everyone. And you're like, oh yeah, we're the greatest now. We get to kill people and take their shit. And I'm like, okay. And then what have you fucking made after that? Oh, nothing. You just stole from every other place with your fucking steamboats and whatever. And then you just made more advanced weapons to kill more people with. That's what you focused on in England. Just focused on making more better, more technologically advanced weapons, machine guns and bullshit, so you could kill everyone and take their shit. You didn't actually innovate jack fucking shit. When you innovated jack fucking shit? It was actually during World War II, when you were forced to, because you needed Alan Turing to create a device to crack the Enigma codes. But you already had MI6 agents embedded within the Nazi network anyway. So you already knew that you were never really going to lose to the Nazis. Not really. They were your pawns the entire time. And so you didn't fucking make jack shit. What did you fucking make? Harry Potter? Fucking Lord of the Rings? That fucking garbage. Bullshit. Yeah. If the Opium War didn't happen, I don't know. But they're just now realizing that they're like, that's what angers white people the most. The rise of China not only angers them because now they're no longer, number one, America, blah, 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 but it angers them on an existential level. It angers them because now, for 500 years, the whites have been running around killing and raping and plundering people for their resources. And now that 500-year reign is coming to an end. That's what they hate the most about China. America did make Halo 3, like Has said, to be frank. Oh, I wasn't talking about America. I was talking about England. America's actually made a lot of stuff. They industrialized the car making process. All the innovation from the space race, obviously. Edison, despite his being a douchebag, did invent a lot of useful products. Yeah. Right. Zionists fear China because it's the only thing that's really standing in their way. China's secure enough now that they pretty much purged all the CIA agents that existed there. So Zionists have no influence in China. That's why no, England has no fucking output. White people have output. I would say the Germans from 1780 to 1880. 1780 to 1880, right? That was pretty much from Kant to Marx, right? A lot of shit there. There's also a lot of bad shit there, too. There's the German Romanticism and the German Schopenhauer and Nietzsche and the Nazi movement, right? So but they are cultural stuff that came out of Germany. And, there are some good aspects of German Romanticism. I won't say that's terribly all terrible, but, And France, well, they got good food. Sometimes they do questionable shit to get that good food, like foie gras. Stuff that if they did that in China, you wouldn't hear the end of it, right? You would be like, oh, what are they doing to these geese? That's so inhumane. Blah, blah, blah. Bullshit like that, of course. Italy, same thing. They got some good food. Uh, they got good fashion, I guess. Um, France and Italy, they got food and fashion, baby. But England's like, what the fuck do they do but kill people and act British? You know what the British invented? The British invented being a fucking douchebag. Being a fucking rich douchebag. Like during the Victorian era, that's what they produced. They produced douchebaggery, how to be passive aggressive, how to be a fucking douchebag. How to be a PMC basically. That's what England created, you know. You know the pedantic. Oh, really? I'm sarcastic. That's why I dismiss your opinions because you're beneath me, you plebeian, you Protestant, no, you proletarian. Get out of here. Let me get my butler to show you the way out. You know? That's what the British invented, just being a fucking total douchebag. And it's very clear that a lot of the people in America have adopted that douchebaggeriness, particularly the white people that hate me. Anyway, yeah, I've been yapping for a while, so let's see if somebody asks me any questions. Uh, uh, uh. Who are you not allowed to talk to about that you mentioned at the start of your stream? All right, that's a funny question. That is a funny question. Um, did I say that? Did I say that I'm not allowed to talk about someone? I think I just said I'm not allowed to talk about something. You know, I think it was just something I'm not allowed to talk about. I don't know if it's someone. Is it someone, somewhere, somehow, something? I don't know. That's a good question. That is a good question. To me, Europeans look like albino Indians. Albino Jeets. Someday, Starside, someday. Um Actually that was my actually theory as to why Indian Americans, or that's part of my theory as to why Indian Americans are more successful in general than even Chinese or Korean or Japanese Americans in America. My theory is that, not only because of the British Raj and all that shit, they know about England, but because of the or they know English, right? They know English pretty well because, they were colonized by Britain for the longest time. So the Brahmin Indians that come over here, the 4% that have fucking passports that are allowed to come over here, um, they have whatchamacallit. They have a better grip on the West because they kind of know the lay of the land. They were directly colonized by Britain. But also, because of their experiences being colonized with Britain, they know how to be a house Jeet, if that makes sense. You know? They know how to say the right things like, yes, sir, no, sir, blah, 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 yes, sir, no, sir, right? They know how to, like, work their masters for a more favorable outcome. And so when they come over to America, they can kind of, like, use that ability to kind of petition for themselves and petition for things like promotions or stuff like soft skills. They have more soft skills than the average Asian person. Because in Asia, it's a different mentality, right? Like they over in the West, there's a lot of Dunning-Kruger, right? People who think highly of themselves or overestimate their own abilities, and they fake it till they make it, and et cetera, et cetera. And Indian people, they picked up on that, right? By 200 years of the Indian Raj, they picked up on those strategies. Whereas China, they weren't directly colonized by the West, nor was Korea, right? Korea was colonized by Japan, so there's different kind of like mentality there too. And Japan was never colonized. And so you have these East Asian countries that come over to America. They're not quite the yes sir, no sir type, because they don't know what the fuck that is. And they kind of are more, I feel like Asians have imposter syndrome, like the opposite of Dunning-Kruger, where they're like, oh, I need to just work hard, put my head down, and results will happen. And if the promotion doesn't happen, that means I just have to work harder and don't say anything until they promote me. And, that's how it's going to happen. But then they don't realize that in America, the rules are kind of like favors. Fortune favors the arrogant, I won't say the bold. In America, fortune favors the fucking arrogant and the people who are just fucking faking it till they make it. That's why you have so many corporate scandals. That's why you have so much fucking bullshit in American business too, industry too. Because it's like, yeah, you hired retards that like know how to talk a lot of verbal diarrhea and $1,000 words. But when it comes to doing the actual math and material engineering work, they don't know what the fuck they're doing, do they? But yeah, except for the Germans. The Germans, too, this came from being behind England for 100 years while they were industrializing. They had better technology. They had better scientists. They had better understanding overall than the British. They were better educated than the British in general. But they did not have England's control. They didn't have England's economy control. They didn't have all the back channels that England had to fucking make itself powerful. So they had to just rely on their more intellectually stronger capabilities because they were kind of playing from behind. I actually don't know much about the Frankfurt School Wi-Fi. You wanna explain that a little bit? Salespeople, exactly. Like India, Britain, America, the West, or really it's just the Anglos and the Indian people and the Jews. Those three people, they're salespeople. They're propagandists. Because finance capital is clearly exploitative, they support it, and then they run interference and propaganda to confuse people about its exploitative power. And so, yeah, that's my theory on why Indian people get ahead more than Asian people in America, or East Asian people. Because they're not shy about asking for more. Whereas Asian people, they're kind of more like, let's not rock the boat here. Let's not jeet the fuck out. Let's just calm down. Just do the work. Get it done. Etc. That's how it is. That's the difference. We need to unpack the intersectional deconstructed up the ass around the way over my MFA in navel gazing while smiling trans perspective on your ism. Yeah, exactly. Just You know, the left, or the liberal left, and the liberals, they do have all these 1,000-word salads. But I'm noticing a lot of that on the right too, you know, especially the intellectual right. There's a lot of that fucking bullshit going on too. A lot of $1,000 words and lots of eternal recurrence and a lot of fucking Nietzsche. Nietzsche, 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 Nietzsche. I feel like a lot of things might have been better in the world if he never lived. I am reading this by Carl Jung. First published in 2009. It was a collection of his notes from this thing called his Black Book. And it's kind of disturbing. I haven't read it all, but let's just say psychology might be tainted. Might be tainted a little bit, especially Western psychology. Western psychology seems to be fitted to support capitalism rather than being fitted to the objectivity of reality. There was a lot of things Jung was assuming based on German philosophers rather than actual fucking science. No, I have not looked into Lacan. It's just kind of like, that's the thing, Starside. I'm just kind of like, I only want to read shit from people who did shit, you know? That's why I'm always kind of like, I have stuff from Mao Zedong I want to read. I have stuff from about Deng Xiaoping I want to read. I have stuff about Kim Il-sung I want to read. You know, why would I waste my time reading about Lacan? I don't even know who the fuck that is. Like, yes, I've kind of heard things in there, or like Zizek or all this other shit. I'm more about like, let me read what actually affected history, right? So on the Nazi side, that's why I read Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, and I'll probably later on read some Heidegger as well. And then on the you know, the Marxist side, I obviously read Hegel and Marx and Lenin. And it's just kind of like, once you have those, it's just kind of like everything else is just window dressing, you know? Everything else is just kind of like gibbering and jabbering. Like, they're just like for example, Ayn Rand and Jean-Paul Sartre. They're just like versions of Nietzsche, right? But once you've read Nietzsche, you don't really even need to. I mean, I will probably read both of them anyway because I need to learn about the CIA. But it's just kind of like from a conceptual level. That's why I like to go to the main source of things. That's why I started with Schopenhauer. Because once I started with Schopenhauer, Kant's Critique of Pure Reason was easier to read and understand. And so I could start with Kant as the source of all that. You know, like, if I have time, might like read stuff like Lacan or whatever, but the fact of the matter is my queue is like, it's got enough. And so that's why I'm reading Jung, because I think Carl Jung, well, first of all, I don't know if you guys know this, but he was, I think the Nazis officially made him like an ideologue that they supported. Let me see. Characterized by collaboration and perceived anti-Semitism. So Jung took the presidency of the German General Medical Society for psychotherapy in 1933, a move seen by many as collaboration with the Nazi regime. He wrote some anti-Semitic writings, claims about Jewish and German psychology, collaboration with Matthias Goering, cousin of Hermann Goering, during this time, and was involved in both dissolving the Berlin Psychoanalytic Institute. I'm sure he didn't know how crazy the fucking Nazis were going to be later on. So I'm not going to like say that like he was like this collaborator the entire time. But it's just kind of like, you know, that's why I read him, to understand exactly how historical events happen. You know, maybe I'll read Lacan. Like I've heard of him. What's he about? What is Lacan about? Psychoanalyst, psychiatrist? I mean, I'm already reading like so much. To me, in terms of psychology, I'm only kind of like interested in more modern stuff, especially science related stuff. I've read stuff about autism, psychopathy, neurobiology, behavioral science. So I'll read that, like more modern stuff about like cutting edge research on neurobiology. But I feel like, you know, theoretical stuff like this, I'm not a huge fan, because I feel like they all kind of come from speculative stuff. And so I don't know. I mean, I might research it at some point, maybe when I do my French episode. But at this point, I feel like I've got too much on my plate to read anything more. Frankfurt School, you can kind of say they infected history in their critique of authoritarianism as a personality disorder, which middle-class normies take for granted. Oh, did they do that? Did I do that? Frankfurt School. The Weimar Republic. Wait, but if that happened, how come Nazism came to power there? Ugh. There's just a lot of shit. Frankfurt theorists proposed that existing social theory was unable to explain the turbulent political factionism, such as Nazism. I'll look into this some other time. Again, I've got a lot of Frankfurt School was a group of Jewish intellectuals backed by the CIA during the Cold War, repping critical theory, adjacent to Orwell, but more philosophical rather than fictional writing. Interesting. Hey, Wi-Fi, do you know what period that would have been? Would that have been in the 1950s? Or would that be after the 67 war? Because that would be significant to my interests. Anyhow, I've been yapping for a while. Yapping about the stuff I'm not allowed to yap about. But I will see you guys later, unless there's any last kind of thing. Anyone have any more final words, final parting thoughts? All I can say is that when the roosters come home to roost, I am not sad, but I am glad. All right. With that, I'm out.